Trees. Trees often appear in religious stories. The Hebrew story of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is the first thing that came to my mind in the Garden of Eden. But there's the Bodhi fig tree that the Buddha sat under until he attained enlightenment. And then there's the ancient Celtic religions that we talked about, Druidism, a couple of Sundays ago when I was here. So they had sacred groves of trees. And actually I found out this week that the word druid actually comes from their word for the word for oak. The Saxons had Irminsul, the sacred tree of life, which for them was the center of the universe. Of course, we can't forget the Christian Christmas tree, can we? And then every Native American tribe in North America has specific trees specific to their region that they hold sacred, and they usually can tell you what medicines come from which trees. And even the Quran has a passage that says, "A goodly word is as a goodly tree, whose root is firmly fixed and its branches reach to the sky." Trees are often one of the first things we notice in our landscape if you live in the upper Midwest, where we're flush with prairies and open flat spaces and grasslands. Think about it when you're going down maybe Interstate 41 or Highway 23 or Highway 10, and you see off in the distance that one lone oak or that one tall pine tree. I often wonder why it isn't struck by lightning. Maybe it is. But it's just something that I notice in our landscape here. And so because the tree is so iconic, it seemed like a great metaphor for me to use today to describe my vision for ministry at this fellowship at Open Circle. But this isn't my vision, so let's get started with our collective vision. It's out, posted on the wall out there, and I meant to take a picture and throw it up in here, but I'll read it to you. So our vision statement is to be a transforming presence in the lives of individuals in the Fond du Lac community. Okay, that's a big deal. I'm going to read it again. To be a transforming presence in the lives of individuals and the Fond du Lac community. That's a big, hairy, audacious goal. And the mission that we've written is we come together as Open Circle Unitarian Universalist Fellowship to experience transcendent mystery and wonder, honoring diversity and religious freedom. And the second statement is, we come to pursue Unitarian Universalism's prophetic vision of peace, justice, compassion, and sustainability, and to create beloved community. Wow. Well, what do these lofty statements mean? Our vision states that we're here to help transform lives. Well, how? The first part of the mission implies that we're going to do that by offering a place to experience transcendence, to lift up diversity and practice our search for meaning in an environment that is free from doctrine, or I would say from evangelism, where I can have a faith journey or a faith tradition, and I have no expectation that you would have the same one, nor can I expect you to have that. We all can figure it out for ourselves. And I think that pretty much describes the environment that we try to create in this space. But then our second statement uses that word vision again. It talks about our prophetic vision. Well, prophetic vision usually refers to something in the future, something aspirational, perhaps a goal we all aspire to. But I think of prophetic vision in the sense of the prophets from the old Hebrew scriptures, where someone talked to the tribe of Israel to say, hey, you're not doing this right. You are the chosen people, and therefore you're supposed to do this better than everybody else, and you should be a shining example to everyone else around you. That's what I think of for prophetic vision, and those are the words that are in our statement. And so that's what I think of when I think of referring to our statement here, if we're going to live into our vision of transforming the lives in the Fond du Lac community. Well, how do we nurture this vision? This is where my tree metaphor kind of comes in. So I think of Open Circle as a tree, and I think of it in three parts. There's the leaves, the roots, and then the trunk. And I'm going to unpack this for you little by little. So the leaves. Unless it's winter, it's usually the first thing you notice about trees. And it's the leaves, especially in the fall. And we're really close to being able to see the leaves starting to change. In fact, I was at High Cliff yesterday with my wife, and she noticed that they were beginning to change already. And we noticed their different colors, their textures. We even talk about the thickness of the foliage of the tree. We think of the yellows of birch, and I think of the orange of aspen leaves, or the scarlet reds of sugar maples, or the dark purples of the crimson king maple, or even the varied colored of browns of the oak trees. So in my tree metaphor, I think of the leaves as representing how then we, as a congregation, are visible to the Fond du Lac community. That's what they would see first. So we are known to the world by these leaves. So if you think about the virtues that are listed in our mission statement, I think of them as a leaf is how we show that virtue to the world. Okay, so bear with me here. I was a little bit poetic and visual here. So I assigned a leaf color to each virtue. So we are supposed to show up with leaves that talk about peace, maybe brown, justice, yellow leaves, compassion, purple, sustainability, green leaves. Beloved community is red, Valentine's is what came to mind. But then I'd add that there are other virtues besides just those that are in our mission statement that we uplift. We say that we uplift the 7 principles. And there's some virtues in there that aren't listed specifically in our mission, and those are dignity, equity, liberty, and truth. And I'll let you come up with your own colors of leaves for those. So my point is that these leaves are all virtues that show up in the community as examples like this. We're a highly engaged people in social justice. We're doers. I believe we want everyone out there to think of us as an oasis of strong, religiously liberal thinking. People who can reverently hold the rational and the spiritual at the same time. And that's hard to do. A people focused really on this world, not necessarily on the next. I think we should be a shining example of inclusiveness and radical hospitality. And we should be a caring people who always choose the most loving path whenever we have some decision to be made. This is my vision of how the Fond du Lac community should see us, to be known by these leaves. Well, let me go to the roots of this tree. The roots is frankly our heritage, and it comes in 3 parts. There's Unitarianism, Universalism, and then just frankly Open Circle's heritage. So Unitarianism, for those of you that are maybe new to this faith, let me give you a brief overview. Not really. It's 500 years of liberal religious thought and an open pursuit for truth and meaning. It was strong, had strong influence in the formation of the United States. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution have phrases like all men are created equal, which come directly out of Unitarian thought at the time. We're strong proponents of the separation of church and state, and we were consistently leaders for social justice, frankly starting back in the anti-slavery movement. So Theodore Parker, it's quoted a lot, is the godfather of Unitarian social justice. And he's known for the quote, and I'll paraphrase it here, "The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice," which was used by Lincoln, and then it was used by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and most recently by Barack Obama. So he was an active member of the Underground Railway. He smuggled slaves to the north and to Canada, and the mythology, I don't know if it's really true, was that he would write his sermons with a loaded pistol on his desk in case someone would show up to try to take his fugitives away. So he's a feisty minister. There were other key initiatives that a lot of prominent Unitarians were a part of, particularly the suffragette movement and the right for women to vote. And then when you got after the merger of Unitarian and Universalism together, we were very prevalent, and that was in 1961, very prevalent in the civil rights movement, in the feminist movement, the gay rights movement, marriage equality, the rights of differently abled people, as well as environmental justice and climate change. So Universalism, it's younger, about 250 years of a belief, frankly, in the inherent goodness of people. So it was a reaction to the Calvinist belief in hell and damnation for all but the chosen few, which was very prevalent in America at that time and still is today. They believed that all are saved. The meaning of Jesus was to teach us how to save the world, not be an icon for individuals being saved. The Universalists were very, very strong in the social gospel movement, which is the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. And they were mostly focused on creating institutional change for the oppressed and the marginalized, particularly immigrants, particularly immigrant women and children who were working in all the knitting mills in New England at the time. Our Universalist roots, frankly, have led us to the open acceptance of world religions and our 6 sources. We have learned through that tradition that all traditions, all religious traditions, have something from which we can learn. And then Open Circle. I looked on your website. I can't even find when you were founded. I was going to guess about 15 years ago, but anybody know what it is?
About 15 years
2003. 15 years ago. Wow. All right. So 15 years ago. And I thought of that, and it was a group of folks who decided to plant a seed, if you want to go with my tree metaphor here, plant a seed that there was another, better, different way, perhaps a stronger tree. And there always have been many of the very active members in this community, and the seed has frankly grown into a young tree, and now's the time to nurture it for stronger and more sustainable growth. So that's our roots. The trunk. The trunk is where it's at, folks. And it's all about nurturing the trunk. And here's how I think of that. I think of all of us in the room, and those that aren't here today, we're all each of the individual fibers that run up the tree from the roots to the leaves. So not when you cut a tree horizontally, but if you kind of slice it like firewood, you see all those fibers running through it. I think of all of us as the individual strands that need to be nurtured and fed individually, but we're not spaghetti noodles that just fall over, right? We're strands that together we have to help hold up the tree. So it's really about striking a healthy balance between coming to Open Circle to nurture yourself and nurturing the community. How do we grow and thrive in community together? Firmly grounded in the roots of Universalism, Unitarianism, and the fellowship's history, but then how do we feed the leaves that the Fond du Lac community is going to see? And what they will know us by. So from my perspective, it's 2 things. You'll hear me talk about these all the time if you haven't picked up on it already. It's healthy relationships and challenging ourselves to grow. Healthy relationships is first. I'm all about our covenant, because we are not a doctrine. We are not held together because you're forced to believe this and that and the other thing. We are a covenantal community, which means we come together, and it says, frankly, that above all else, it's about relationships and being in healthy relationship. And that isn't a Pollyanna vision of community. We know that people fight, they don't disagree, we're not supposed to agree all the time, but it's a commitment that we will come back into covenant. We will try to do that. That's what we're here to do. And we're not going to read the whole covenant every Sunday, but I've tricked you. And when I'm here and we have the chalice lighting words, I've paraphrased them. And so every Sunday that I'm here, you're recommitting to that covenant. That's what those opening words are. So it starts with the covenant, but then I go back to this tenet that it guides me in life, and I hope it guides you, is what is the most loving thing to do, always. And we all know, if you've been around kids, either raised your own or been around others, being the most loving thing to do doesn't mean you always give in to every tantrum that's happening, but it means that you come to a path that will bring us back to right relations and being in that loving community. So kind of think of it in that way. So frankly, we should treat each other like a chosen family. So here's some of the things I thought of if we're a chosen family, what you would do if you're a family. Be curious about each other. Want to know who we are. What inspires each of us. How we each practice Unitarian Universalism, because there's probably about 40 people in the room, and there's probably 40 ways that we practice Unitarian Universalism. Celebrate the joys. It's all part of what this is, the Candles of Community, really lifting up those joys in the community. And then, yes, some of us, the extroverts, are willing to share our concerns, but there's a lot of folks who that makes them very, very uncomfortable. So I would ask you to watch for the concerns in coffee hour, in the hallway. Be ready with a listening ear, because that's what it's all about. Often it's enough to just know that someone cares. And I have to give you a little bit of an aside. I'm working as a sabbatical minister, quarter time, just July through December in the Appleton Fellowship, while the associate minister is on sabbatical. My primary function is pastoral care. And I thought it was going to be one of these things where, you know, operators are standing by, filling out my appointment schedule. It doesn't work that way. I tend to wander around the hallways, and people will come to just drop off mail, and we'll start talking, and then inevitably someone will go, "Do you have a minute?" And we walk into my office, and there we go. And so it's just, sometimes it's that easy that you just need to feel a little bit comfort and trust with the person you're talking to. They don't want advice from me, and I'm probably not the person to give it to them anyway. They just want to know that somebody that they trust knows what's going on. And I find that very spiritual. Family members are present to each other, even though it may not be what we would have chosen to do as individuals, okay? This is that individual fiber versus trunk thing again. Once again, go back to kids. You know, I went to so many recitals and so many soccer practices that I would have rather gone for a bike ride or walked in the woods. But, you know, they're my kids. Kind of people expect the dad to show up and help out with these kind of things. It's sort of the same thing here. And I came up with some examples that if I'm just as guilty at most of these things as all of y'all. So the first one is we need to listen to the stories for the 12th time, because we know the teller is still processing the narrative and telling it may be therapy, or because they simply don't recall telling you. Does it really hurt to listen to it one more time? Then I love this one. We need to try that strange-looking cake or snack at coffee hour, even though we're on the fill-in-the-blank kind of diet, low-carb, vegan, vegetarian, gluten-free, sugar-free, whatever. Simply acknowledge that someone was kind enough to bring it. I know that you may end up tossing most of it, but that's not the point. The point is that they know that you acknowledge that they brought it. That's what counts. Or here's another one. This is one of the most creative congregations I've ever been involved with, and it's fantastic. And I see a lot of this, but I think we could do more, what I'm about to talk about. We should try and participate in everyone else's creative outlets. Whether it's a music or dance recital, or a music concert, or an art fair, or an art opening, or somebody publishes a book and we should read it, or go to the theater production, or attend a sporting match, or buy a piece of homemade jewelry or a jar of pickles. Simply because they asked, and we might get to know them better by doing so. It's not the act of whatever you just did. It's the fact that you got to figure out what makes them tick is what it's about. Especially if the activities are here at the fellowship. I kind of have a motto that I used over my 25 years in the fellowship in Appleton. I came for the people and stayed for the religion. So my second point is to challenge you to grow in your head, in your heart, in your spirit. You may have to do things that make you a little bit uncomfortable or you'd prefer not to do, but it's part of the trunk of beloved community. And these aren't that hard. Try a different spiritual practice. You saw me with this medicine wheel out here, and some of you were brave enough to come up and do my goofy dance moves with me. I appreciate that. Try a different spiritual practice. We don't have groups here yet, like a Buddhist Sangha and maybe a Jewish study group and a humanist group that I'm aware of, but there's certainly individuals with diverse spiritual practices. Get to know them, and maybe you can start something with a small group. Then there's small group discussions. This is more of the intellectual side, but it also blends to the heart side. There's chalice circles. They're still enrolling right now and opening those up. Usually it's a little bit more of an intellectual topic. I would throw book club in there as well. Typically it's a work of literature that's kind of meaty and it's intellectual. But then there's men's group, women's group, all kinds of stuff where it's small groups where maybe it's less intellectual and a little bit more about the heart. They're there. Take good part of it. Committees. the C word. It's how we get things done around here. It's not glamorous, but it's very important. And frankly, that's how you get to know a lot of folks and really know them on a different level than just sitting next to them in this room on Sunday morning. There's service planning and music. There's hospitality, the building decor group, caring circle. There's outreach, which is kind of a blend of all of these kind of things. Or just plain help with administrative tasks. Every month, Tracy and I are kind of crashing and burning trying to get all things out, and some of you volunteer to edit stuff for us, and you wouldn't believe how many typos they catch. Or just staple things. I mean, we could use all kinds of help, or with RE. In fact, that's my next one. Build skills at relating to folks who aren't like you. Help with a religious education class. There's two ways you can do that, and don't be afraid. If you haven't been around little kids for a long time or never have, don't be afraid. We're going to hire a teacher, so they're responsible for what's going on in the room, but it's best policy to also have another adult in the room, because one of them might be melting down that day and needs a little extra attention. Or maybe there's some supplies that happen to be in the cupboard out in the hallway instead of in the room. Or somebody needs to go to the bathroom. So maybe once a semester, once a year, you could be the adult that just goes in there and enjoys yourself with the kids and listens to the activities. Or, if you'd like to talk about your passions, we have a role for you. So we're changing the RE curriculum to make sure that it's much more connected to everybody in this room so that the children don't only know the teacher. So once a month, our goal is if you have a passion, it could be bicycling, it could be gardening, it could be painting, it could be maybe you're a doctor and taking care of patients, anything that's your passion, we would love to have you come in and talk to the kids about it for 10 minutes. We'll help you make it child-friendly. And it'll fit in with whatever the theme is for that, so that it's not always just the story that's going to talk about the story and do a creative activity. We would love for them to get to know you and hear, and they vice versa. Okay? And then there's the social justice organizations. Very strong foundation of social justice organizations here. Just kind of tip your toe into the water there. I'm sure there's all kinds of different levels of involvement that you can be involved in. And then finally, I guess I would say there's financial support as a spiritual endeavor and spiritual growth. Challenge yourself to give a greater percentage than you now do. I know this is going to turn everybody off, but I've got to say, about a decade ago, my wife and I decided that we were going to tithe. I mean, we're not like super biblical kind of thing. We just thought tithing 10%, why not? So we give away 10% of our income, have for over a decade. And 5% goes to our fellowship. And it's just something that we feel that it's actually very spiritual. Because frankly, we give up going out to eat a number of times to save the money to give it away. And we feel very good about giving that money away to organizations that we really, really believe in. So consider that. These are all ideas of how we grow that trunk of the tree. Consider them carefully and then commit. Become more than an individual fiber. Be an integrated part of the trunk of this congregation. So I'm going to take you back to the trees of Kenya. And what does the story of Wangari Maathai tell us about trees? The first was, don't take something good for granted. The fig tree was sacred. The trees helped hold the topsoil so it didn't wash away, so the streams could be pure and those frogs and tadpoles could flourish. She said there was a mix of tea plantations and small farms, but something changed radically in 5 years. It turned all into plantations. They took the trees and the good land for granted. We don't want to do that here. Number 2 is remember the interrelatedness and the longevity of things. The tree apparently was the linchpin holding Kenya together. The short-term greed for more profit caused major long-term ramifications. We're in this for the long haul for this tree of the fellowship. 3 is persistence. The solutions there took a long time. It was slow, there were mistakes, and things didn't always work out as the way they were planned. All the trees in your backyard died. But persistence and the ability to humbly accept what doesn't work and try again, and maybe another solution, will eventually help you get there. It took 30 years in the story. And then finally, collaboration was key. One person planting trees in their backyard was not going to reforest Kenya. It required all the women and the gardeners, all the men and all the able-bodied to work, that are able-bodied to work in the families, all the school children, all the soldiers. It required everybody to do their part. Well, ultimately, then, the mission of my ministry, tied to all of these things, is to help us stay rooted in Unitarian Universalism and Open Circle's roots. To help you create the environment that not only feeds you as an individual fiber, but encourages us to build the relationships to the other fibers and then the stronger trunk. To enable our leaves to flourish so that we can all live up to our aspirational vision statement, which I will remind you is to be a transforming presence in the lives of individuals and the Fond du Lac community. Because I fervently believe that this congregation is a life-giving tree and deserves to be nurtured. And may we look back in 30 years and be proud of how well we did that now. Ashe and Amen. And I think it is the time